intake levels. Got your daily dose of news nutrients here tonight for both presidential candidates. Hillary Clinton, late today, gave the world a fuller look at her medical background and current status. Her campaign emailed around details about that recent bout with pneumonia that she's gone through, as well as her current medical regime. We're told that she's had a normal mammogram and that her cholesterol level is 189. Campaign also released some of her vitals, things like blood pressure and heart rate, all in a normal zone. The release concludes with a quote from her doctor who said, Clinton, quote, continues to remain healthy and fit to serve as president of the United States. So, Donnie, this document is more information than we had before. It's not the most voluminous release ever. Is it enough to quiet Clinton's critics?
First, let me frame it. You know, we have two candidates who are 70 years old, and I have some very sobering news for the American public and their families. Out of 100,000 people between the ages of 65 and 74, during that period of time, almost 20% will die. So there's a 1 in 5 chance one of these people could die in office. They're not young people. Let's frame that. I think what Hillary did today was not only enough to satisfy, but is on the offensive. You know, both either the brilliance or the sinisterness of Trump is that all he does is talk about the opaqueness of Hillary, yet we contrast today what he did. He went on Oz and said he eats fast food and waved that same letter, no meat on the bone. Hillary didn't do anything sexy today. She wasn't on Oz, but she released a lot of very pointed facts and figures about her health. And Donald Trump absolutely has to match her point for point now, or he's going to be, I think, in a really, really difficult position.
She put out, as best I can tell, enough to satisfy people who are serious about this and want statistics for the purpose of actually saying the basic credibility of her doctor, not with, you know, whether that's you believe that or not. Statistics that say she's healthy enough to serve as president. I do think she's put down a baseline. The conspiracy theorists are never going to be happy. They're still going to wonder if they're hiding something. But I think, based on the initial read of the documents, she has met the standard that many past candidates have done. Enough to say, here are the basics. Here's what she's being treated for. Here's her medical history.
And I find it stunning these two things happen on the same day. Here we are sitting with just papers going over it. And Trump's solution was, once again, to go on a daytime talk show, to kibitz, to kid around. Once again, there are no facts. And I think the irony of this whole thing is whether it comes to charitable foundations, whether it comes to taxes, whether it comes to business dealings. Hillary Clinton has been front and center for 30 or 40 years, and we still know very little about Donald Trump. And this is the most stunning example. We'll get to Trump in a second,
but let me say this about Clinton. They put out more stuff today, right? I don't know why they didn't do it before, because the reality is they only did it because Trump said he was putting that stuff out and because of the pneumonia. And for them to say, act all high and mighty, like now we're putting out more about Hillary Clinton, they should have done it before.
Absolutely. And I think they acknowledged it. They clearly should have acknowledged it.
No, they haven't acknowledged it. They're pretending they're doing it like in the normal course.
No, well, they said as far as hiding the pneumonia thing was incorrect. They made a mistake there. Clearly, they put it out for that reason, and they had to. And, you know, once again, I think they've drawn a baseline. And I think there's just way too much. I think we all have to go on the premise that they're both 70, and neither one of these, I know we're going to talk about Trump's health and his Putin-like testosterone levels, but it's safe to say, I'm going to give you another fact. 70% of all people over the age of 70 have hearing loss. 70% have hypertension. And bad news for one of the candidates, between 40 and 60% have erectile dysfunction at that age. So there's a lot of issues that you're not even breaking your smile on that one.
Good segue. Now, we're going to talk a lot more about what's in Hillary Clinton's release as well as Trump throughout the program.
We'll have more on this later. We're still waiting for Donald Trump to release some additional information on his health this week. Today, Trump did an incremental thing. He taped an interview, as I said, with Dr. Oz, in which he discussed his cholesterol, enjoyment of fast food, and desire to drop weight. We now know the Republican nominee weighs 236 pounds, and he considers campaigning his source of exercise. As I said, Trump's testosterone level is apparently off the chart. It's huge. It's huge. It's all huge. Those revelations were a summary of a physical exam Trump had last week with the same doctor who said last year Trump would be the healthiest individual ever elected. Okay, now that Clinton has kind of drawn the line in the sand, does Trump have to match her point for point?
I could ask the control room. Did we get Trump's weight right? 236? Is that correct? I'm waiting to find out. I thought they said it was higher than that. 2:36.
Don't dodge the question.
Okay. Look, we got to wait to see what he puts out. You know, this morning they suggested he wasn't going to say anything on Oz. Then he gave Oz the letter. He didn't put very much out. I agree with you. He's taken something which is long overdue, more disclosure about his health, and turned it into a carnival of sorts by going on a show. At the same time, I think he should have used a different doctor. I don't know that doctor.
Oh, he looks very credible.
But that doctor
is the Jerry Garcia of the medical profession.
That doctor is. I mean, if you were doing this in a straightforward and serious way, you would say, that guy's been my doctor. I love him. I think he's a great doctor. But by doing an interview with NBC, an interview with CNN, by becoming the butt of jokes, I think it's not in Trump's interest. I don't think it's in that doctor's interest, and I don't think it's in the public interest to have that guy be the guy, because the fact is, with all these medical releases for all these candidates every 4 years, you rely on the credibility of the doctor, that the tests are legit, they were done in a serious and rigorous way, the doctor's putting his or her credibility on the line.
Mark, this election, more and more with every issue, comes down to left brain, right brain. If you look at the left brain on this issue right now, you have one factual and you have the other, as I said, with this goofy doctor. It's a question now, are the people going to just believe Trump at his word? Because it's not, most of what he talks about is either not backed up with fact or is at best highly suspect and at worst a complete lie. But he has this other thing, this other strength that allows people to kind of forgive, to overlook. And I said this last week, I think this is going to be a little bit of a IQ test for the American public, and do we operate with our left or our right brains?
If Trump puts out the kind of statistics Hillary Clinton put out, barring either of them having a health episode, I think it's possible that the discussion of their fitness for office and her condition, I think outside certain quarters on the internet and cable TV and talk radio, for both of them will be put to rest, as it should be. But as you pointed out, and I've been saying for a while, just look at the actuarial tables and the health tables. 70-year-olds are going to have health problems.
That's it. What's interesting also is he talked about his exercises campaigning. If you contrast the two, Hillary is doing 3 and 4 events a day. Trump, by nature, has one event near an airport.
He has stepped it up.
But still, would you say the veracity? And once again, I'm not saying this means health one way or the other.
They are both, for their age, impressive in their endurance. And I don't want to minimize Hillary Clinton's endurance because she's been out there working really hard. I went with Trump, 100-degree day last summer, Iowa State Fair. He walked for 45 minutes.
Okay, good.
In the heat, shaking hands, posing for photos, talking to people. We got to the pork producer's tent. He sat down for maybe 20 seconds, got right back up. That guy has got incredible stamina, as does she. All right, more about Hillary Clinton's health in a little bit, and Donald Trump. But up next, we've got a brand new Bloomberg Politics Ohio poll out today that is shaking up the race in a practical and psychological way. That and more when we come back.
Bloomberg Politics has a brand new Ohio State poll out this morning, and it shows Donald Trump. It doesn't even sound like him. With a 5-point lead on Hillary Clinton in the Buckeye State. He's up 48 to 43% in a head-to-head race among likely voters. That margin didn't change much when third-party candidates were included. Amid the bad news for Clinton, her unfavorability rating is at a bruising 57%. And that's not pretty, considering 52% of Ohio likely voters had an unfavorable view of Trump. We're going to look at the guts of this poll later in the show, but first, big picture. Is this a crucial state for Trump and his narrow path? How important is this?
Trump has to win Ohio. That's one of the points the Clinton folks have made. So he's like, okay, maybe Trump wins Ohio. He has to win Ohio to win. This poll hit big today. Now, CNN has a poll out this evening, says the exact same thing, Trump up by 5. This is a big deal because if Trump wins Ohio, it doesn't guarantee he wins the White House. It gives him a chance. But it changes the whole psychology of the race. And every person I told this result to today gasped or shook their head in a very meaningful way. If Ohio goes to Trump, it's a huge deal. Ohio is Ohio. Yeah. And it puts them in a position. Now, the Democrats' other argument is we've got a ground game in Ohio that's going to make up whatever gaps in the polling. But 5 points is a big deal. And the Senate race, which the Republican incumbent, Rob Portman, is up very big in our poll, has been in other public polling. That's another big deal because they would keep the Republican Party together if their down ballot candidates are doing well and Trump's doing well.
I guessed. I mean, I had that same reaction. Look, let's also say that Ohio has elected every president since 1964. Let's also just qualify it in that it was taken from Friday to Monday. Hillary Clinton's probably worst 72 hours, combination of the deplorable baskets and obviously her stumble on character. And 3 days earlier, CBS had a poll that had her up by 6 or 7. Yeah. So we have to qualify it. Having said, let me tell you why this is huge for Trump. If you go back to the primaries, Trump's club, nobody does winning other than Charlie Sheen better than Trump. If you watch the debates, every time somebody would challenge Trump on something, he'd go, well, he's only saying this because I'm in the lead. So he has this club. Every time Hillary Clinton says something or anybody says something, he says, Donald Trump, you know, you want to build a wall. Look, they're going to say whatever they're going to say because I'm up in Ohio and I'm winning. He co-opts that and owns that more brilliantly than any other candidate. So beyond the actual fact of the poll, he has actually not had that tool over the past 4 or 5 weeks. And his number one weapon of choice is, I'm winning, you're not. If
he can maintain the lead, and you're right, you can look at the fact that the poll was taken during her week period with both baskets of deplorables and pneumonia. You can say, well, that shows that she can bounce back. This is misleading. On the other hand, you can say that suggests that those two things hurt. Now, will they hurt in a sustained way? We'll have to see as polling goes forward. But there's no doubt that a candidate who's up in Ohio at that big a lead has got bragging rights because Ohio, as I said before, is Ohio.
Just one more thing on the polls because we're about 10 days away from the debate. If he has polls in his favor that debate, that is such a weapon because anytime she comes at him and go, Hillary, you're only saying that.
You lost your lead.
Yeah,
you lost your lead.
It's a stunning thing to have.
All right, last night, Trump unveiled his child care plan in an event in suburban Pennsylvania outside Philadelphia. He appeared with his daughter, Ivanka, and together they laid out a tax deduction for child care expenses, also called for 6 weeks of maternity leave by extending unemployment insurance benefits for working mothers. Democrats, and a lot of the national media, immediately started poking holes in what Trump proposed, raising questions about how it would be paid for and saying that a lot of the benefits go to those who don't need the help and doesn't help people at lower income levels who don't file income tax, pay income tax. But if you were watching television in the Philadelphia area, here's the type of coverage you would have heard on local television.
Jim, at one point in this building behind me, we heard one parent yell, wow, in response to Donald Trump's child care policy.
There were hundreds of others who weren't invited standing outside cheering Trump. Although not the vintage Trump people are accustomed to hearing, supporters were delighted with his speech.
The Republican presidential nominee says he doesn't want moms and dads going broke caring for their kids. And parents we spoke to tonight say they're on board.
Now, Trump says he was joined on the stage tonight by 5 Republican congresswomen, possibly a sign that Trump is now starting to reach out to some of his colleagues on Capitol Hill.
Murphy says Trump's plan for affordable child care can't come soon enough.
It'd be really nice to be able to afford daycare.
And so tonight, with his opponent down temporarily due to illness, Trump is showing no signs of slowing down.
On another note, we also found out that the New York Attorney General will open an inquiry, or has already opened an inquiry, on the Trump Foundation. We'll keep an eye on that latest development.
As you can see, this, with the exception of that one little bit, very positive coverage for Trump in that key market. And things continue today with the campaign on the offensive. Ivanka Trump front and center, campaigning for her father on this issue today. She came back out this morning pitching the plan on both Good Morning America and here on Fox and Friends.
I've long advocated for professional women my whole professional career. My father has also employed thousands of women throughout his life, and he understands their needs, and he recognizes the challenges with our broken childcare system, and he wants to propose innovative new solutions to those challenges.
So this policy speech and the rollout is now something of a template for the campaign with the policy rollouts they plan in addition between now and Election Day. So, Donnie, clearly the campaign was going for just that kind of coverage. As a case study for how the Trump campaign is executing, what would you say?
Very strong and completely demonstrative of the point I was making earlier of the headline or the sizzle versus the fact and what's on the bone. In reality, he came out and he's giving 6 weeks maternity leave. He says Clinton is not doing anything but childcare, where in effect she's giving 12 weeks. In effect, this was also not at the lower or the middle class, the people who need it the most. It really was for the upper middle class and the wealthy. If you make $500,000 a year, you get a 39% tax break. If you make $60,000 a year, you get a 15% tax break. So if you compare the two, Hillary Clinton still has a stronger plan. But that doesn't matter, because Trump just goes out and people rest on a headline. So it was very smart. And he's doing the same thing, even go back 2 weeks. He went to Mexico. It just stops there. Yep. Oh, yeah, he went to Mexico. Very top line, but very smart.
We all need to scrutinize both their plans and look at them. And you're absolutely right that there's more to ask about what he's proposing. You can also say, just from the point of view of the reality of the next 60 days, that was one of their most successful executions of anything they've done. We showed the local Philadelphia coverage. I sampled media, national and state media, all day. They had surrogates out there talking about it, reinforcing it. They had Ivanka, who's a big force multiplier, and they got the exact kind of coverage they wanted to get. Trump talking about this issue and being on offense, and his performance last night in the event itself was another strong performance just in terms of the mechanics of presentation. So we've got to scrutinize the policy, but from the campaign's point of view, they are delighted.
And this was not about childcare. This was about suburban women who he doesn't have that talks to.
All right, up next, we continue to check up on Hillary Clinton's health care with some political reporters right after this. Welcome back to the special healthcare edition of With All Due Respect. We're talking more about Hillary Clinton's release of her medical records and Donald Trump, who today, in a taping for Dr. Oz's show, announced his weight. Donnie earlier said today he said it was 236. There are conflicting reports, though, from people who are in the room. Some are saying that Trump said his weight was 267. Big difference with that. We're going to have to wait and see when we see the actual show, but we're going to press forward now to talk about Hillary Clinton and the release she just made. With us, Bloomberg Politics Clinton reporter Jennifer Epstein from Washington, D.C., Ann Gearin, who covers Hillary Clinton, the national political reporter for the Washington Post, and also here in studio, the New York Times, Jim Rutenberg. Welcome all. Jennifer Epstein, start with you to kind of break down as we go through this. What did Hillary Clinton announce, release today about her medical history and present status that's new, and what didn't she put out today that people were looking for?
Well, it was just kind of a rundown of the same information that she had released a little bit over a year ago. Things like her cholesterol level and all of that, and all those kinds of things were in the normal level. The only thing that was unusual was that she has pneumonia right now, and it was described as a mild case that she's taking the antibiotic Levaquin for right now, and on a 10-day dose of that. And that's really the only thing that really stands out that's immediate. But there is this new piece of information that we hadn't learned before, which was that back in January she had sinusitis and an ear infection, and ultimately it was having so much pain and had fluid in her ear that a little tube was put into her ear. So that is a new thing that we hadn't known about before. I think it's a pretty standard thing for people who get ear infections, but it's still, you know, it hadn't been out there, and now it is.
Jim,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And Gearin, in the Washington Post newsroom, how are you all analyzed this so far?
Well, I think she was, as Jen said, I mean, this is an update of existing health information released by her doctor last year. It's in summary form. It is about as detailed as most presidential candidates and the sitting president himself have released in recent years, but it is far from exhaustive. And I think, you know, for somebody who has been the subject of as much speculation, baseless entirely according to her campaign, this isn't going to settle or answer all of those conspiracy theories by a long shot.
Jim, was today a good day or a bad day for the American public in that we've got 60 some odd days to the election? Today was spent on cholesterol levels. I can't remember any presidential race this much time. Obviously, they're both 70. They're in fit health, but to Mark's earlier point on what they're doing. Are we wasting too much time on this?
I don't know, because I think the hang-up here is the willingness to disclose information. So I know what you mean, yes, and I'm sure much of the American public thinks that. At the same time, it's why is it pulling teeth to get this basic information? And in both cases, and here in Mrs. Clinton's health records, it's wait till something bad happens and then we'll give you some information. We don't want that from our leaders.
My theory is the reason it's hard is because they're both 70. And the same way they tell you when you're 58, don't get an MRI because the MRI is going to tell you X, Y, and Z, they're both going to be in the defensive position. Because even now, we're going through a list of 17 things that Hillary has, but where are those two that she didn't show us? They're both 70. Health is not going to be their asset, period.
She's supposed to go back out on the road tomorrow.
Yeah,
do we know that she's recovered?
Bill Clinton says she's recovered. He said he talked to her earlier today, and she was doing great when he was campaigning for her in Las Vegas. So, you know, we have to kind of assume that he knows what he's talking about there. You know, she kind of wanted to keep going all the way through, and, you know, it was only because of the incident on Sunday that she stopped campaigning. And I would guess that other than a couple of brief mentions and maybe even taking some questions from reporters tomorrow, she's going to move ahead as normal and try not to dwell on this, because that was what she was attempting to do when she had the incident on Sunday.
And before the world changed with baskets of deplorables and what happened at Ground Zero, Hillary Clinton was talking to the traveling press almost every day. She goes back out tomorrow. Do you expect her to resume that?
Well, we have no specific indication of it, but I would think it's likely. She certainly is going to want to be seen walking, talking, behaving like the Democratic presidential nominee in full tomorrow, and part of that should be talking to the press. It'll be the first time she's been back on her plane and the press with her tomorrow, so the setting is sort of natural. I also just think it's kind of the time in the campaign that in the election that the campaign had already set aside as, Hillary tries to make the election about her instead of about Donald Trump, focuses on her policy positions. For her, that means she actually does have to talk to the press whether she wants to or not. So now they're going to have to try to make up ground from the days they lost and get back to that point in the election and the calendar they'd set for themselves.
Jim, we mentioned earlier in the show that Hillary putting out her health care points are going to obligate Trump to do the same. I'm giving it a little bit more thought and saying, does Trump skate at a different level that with his followers, he has the ability to say, my doctor said I'm fine, that's all you get, and that he is held to a different level of accountability?
I think he is. I mean, and by the way, he's presenting his medical records on television.
Exactly.
Almost, I don't want to quite call it a reality show, but it's almost the same difference, right?
Right.
So is that how he'll go, from the White House? Like he'll go on Dr. Oz, if there's a problem when he's in the Oval Office. But so, yeah, I think he is held to a slightly different standard that's been driving the Clinton people nuts. But at the same time, they're trying to hide behind it, too. Hey, we've released more than Trump. Well, it took you, let's look at what day it is and, the belated information about your condition.
And when you went to the Clinton campaign's website today to look at the actual letters about Secretary Clinton and about her running mate Tim Kaine, the immediate pop-up there was look at what we're doing, so much transparency, and Donald Trump hasn't released his medical records or his tax returns.
And that was a message not just for the press, but for anybody.
No, that was like the pop-up. Yep.
I've never seen anything quite like that. Jim, real quick, we got less than 30 seconds. If you could ask Donald Trump one question today, what would it be?
Oh, man, that is one question?
Yeah.
Only get one.
One question interview.
When are you going to release your taxes and why haven't you so far?
And one Hillary Clinton question, 2 seconds.
What is your Libya?
Jim Bloomberg, Jennifer Epstein, and Garen, thank you all.
Thank you for playing along.
We'll do more during recess. Coming up, we're going to stay on the story about Clinton and Trump and their health on this special Medical Center edition of With All Due Respect when we come back.
Welcome back. We are joined now by Alex Castellanos, who works as the creative leader for the pro-Trump super PAC, Rebuilding America Now PAC, and Democratic strategist Steve McMahon. They both work with Purple Strategies and both join us from our D.C. bureau. Let me start with you, Alex, on today's special Dr. Kildare edition of With All Due Respect. Mark and I earlier said, okay, Hillary has put a baseline down, as she released a bunch of very factual, very specific test results. Does Donald Trump have to match that point for point? And if he does not, does this have any effect on his campaign?
No, he doesn't, and no, it does not. No one cares. What you said earlier, Donnie's exactly right. Donald Trump gets to skate above all of this, but frankly, that's what makes sense. It's not an issue in this election, his health. You know, Hillary Clinton is the one who fainted going into a truck, and they poured her in that van like she was a sack of oatmeal or something. So I think she's the one who has issues. We all know how tough a job this is. You have the weight of the world on your shoulders. I think it's a legitimate thing once questions like that have been raised to answer. I think she should just explain that she fainted because she saw Donald Trump was up 5 points in Ohio.
So, Alex, you actually think it's fine that a candidate has been propelling health issues as far as Hillary, challenges her, she comes up with the answers, and he does not have to respond. So you're subscribing to he does play at a different level.
I'm not saying it's fine. The question was, are voters going to make their decisions based on this? No, they see Donald Trump as a healthy candidate. They see Hillary Clinton as some issues. It's a bigger issue for her. She also has honesty issues, as Rutenberg mentioned. You know, people don't know whether to believe what she's saying about her health. So I think it's a much bigger issue for her. And if Trump doesn't want to go there, I don't think it'll hurt him.
Steve, how much are Democrats shaken up by Hillary Clinton's problem over the weekend with her pneumonia and that video?
Well, I mean, I think the video shook some people up, but I don't think anybody who's seen Hillary Clinton campaigning for the last several years or in the last couple of days just being out on the street has any concerns about her health. And any concerns people might have had, I think were more than addressed today with a fairly robust disclosure of health records that didn't just say she's the most spectacularly healthy woman ever to run for president or the healthiest person ever to enter the Oval Office. They were actually real reports by real doctors with real tests, real information, and that's what Donald Trump should be doing himself, is releasing similar kinds of reports.
There's a lot of stuff discussed on this program and in other programs that people in politics will say to journalists, that doesn't matter, real voters don't care about that. I get that, and I think that's often right. So let me ask Steve first, then Alex. Besides the debates, what matters?
Besides the debates, what matters?
Yeah.
I'd say the way they begin to close the campaign and whether or not they are offering people a positive aspirational vision for the country as opposed to just trying to tear down their opponent.
You really think, I'm not being cynical, I'm just being a little skeptical here. You really think offering a positive vision is what matters? I hope you're right.
Here's what I think, Mark. Here's what I think,
Mark. You do or you don't, Alex?
I don't think you can drive either of these candidates' favorables or unfavorables any higher. They are what they are, and they now at some point have to turn to the future and offering a vision for the future and connecting to the future in a way that Americans are going to respond to. The undecided voters are undecided for a reason, and I believe that's what it is.
I hate to agree with my partner. But as I often do, I think he's right on this. We just ran an interesting test in Youngstown, Ohio. We ran 800 points of a positive, the dreaded positive commercial. We finally made one about Donald Trump, but it's not so much about him as about the country.
Paid for by
and what
the super PAC you work for that's supporting Trump.
The super PAC, yeah, supporting Trump. And guess what? Voters are hungry for that kind of message. They do want somebody who's going to tell them how we're going to make America great again. What's in this election for them? And I think Trump has a much better message on that. You know, we're going to bring jobs back, economic growth, open up our economy, those kind of things. He's a business guy with credibility. What we found when we ran that commercial in Youngstown, we went from +2 Trump up 2 points, to Trump up 18 points. So the dreaded positive commercial may actually be what decides this race.
Hey, Steve, we were going to do a segment today on bedwetting, which party wets their bed more when things start to go bad. Clearly, one could see the Ohio poll as a bedwetting moment for the Democrats. What do you think is going on around the country now with operatives, with strategists, with the campaign based on that?
I actually don't think it is. Here's why. There are 12 battleground states that Donald Trump basically needs to win all of. And there's been one poll in one of those states that shows Hillary Clinton ahead. Alex's super PAC did a nice ad in Youngstown.
You mean that shows Trump ahead?
I'm sorry, that shows Trump ahead. Alex's super PAC did a nice ad in Youngstown, Ohio for a candidate, and it had a nice impact. But that's ultimately not a national campaign. That's a one market, one spot shot. And I think when Hillary Clinton begins to do the same thing, which I hope she begins to do soon, you're going to see the same kind of a result. Donald Trump has to run the table. Hillary Clinton does not. There's no bedwetting on our side.
When you look at the real numbers in these states, though, you know, we've seen numbers with Trump up in North Carolina. He's up in Ohio, Pennsylvania, tight. We have numbers that say that. So, yeah, I wonder if this race is not already over, and maybe Trump has won this thing. You know, both these candidates have huge negatives, more negatives about each of them. You're trying to burn down the same house twice. I'm not sure it'll change anything. But there's an element of, underneath all that, a desire for change.
Alex, have you raised any?
That may be what determines this.
Have you convinced any donors to write big checks on your Youngstown experiment to try to run tens of millions of dollars of positive ads in battleground states?
We're up statewide in Pennsylvania tomorrow, starting tomorrow in every market except Philadelphia, with our positive 60-second spot.
Guys, where each one of you has 20 seconds, you're whispering in the ear of your candidate as they're walking on stage to debate 10 days from now. Steve, start with you. What's your 20-second message to Hillary Clinton?
I'd say be yourself, look like you're having fun, smile, don't raise your voice, don't let him throw you off stride, go in and do what you need to do, stay on message, and you're going to win this debate and win this presidency.
Alex, not that he's going to listen to you, but what are you going to say to him?
I'm going to say, tell us how you're going to make America great again, and that there's something better for us all over the horizon, that we don't have to settle for the way things are now.
Okay.
And with the extra time, I'd tell Hillary Clinton to just bash him in the face. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
That is the main event, and we will be. I think we should put a countdown clock on now. Okay, Alex Castellanos, Steve McMahon, thank you both. We will break down the big new Bloomberg Politics Ohio poll that we've been talking about and what's going on in that critical battleground state when we come right back.
When we haven't been talking about statins and cholesterol, we've been talking about our new poll done, voters in Ohio, where Donald Trump has a 48 to 43% lead over Hillary Clinton in the Bloomberg Politics poll. Down ballot, the survey also shows that Republican Senator Rob Portman is way out ahead of his Democratic challenger, the former Governor Ted Strickland, 53 to 36%. With us now, the person who did the poll for us, Ann Seltzer, joining us as usual from Des Moines, Iowa. Ann, let's talk about, implicit in this is who's going to vote in Ohio. This sample shows an electorate that looks more like 2004 when George Bush famously beat John Kerry in Ohio rather than President Obama's 2 wins. Talk about what that makeup is and why we think that might be what the electorate looks like.
Well, the reason we think that's what the electorate looks like is that's what our data are telling us. You know, people read into our polls that we must be deciding what we want that split to be of Republican, Democrat, and Independent. And in fact, our method says we know that party ID is a floating variable. It's a mushy variable. It's not a fixed variable. So we let our respondents tell us if they pass our likely voter screen and a higher proportion of Republicans pass through that screen than Democrats, then we're going to trust that that's indicative of what's happening
so Ann, when we say,
in the state.
When we say it looks more like 2004, it's more Republican, but what else?
It's more Republican than Democrat, but it's more Republican than we saw in 2008 or 2012. And a lot of people are saying, well, gosh, 2008, that's 8 years ago. Things should look pretty much the same. But as you know very well, 2008 changed the way we understand the way elections can be won. And so I wanted to go back, once we saw what our data were showing us, to see, well, what happened before that.
Right.
And we uncovered that it looks like 2004, but there's a misperception that we created our poll to look like 2004, and not the case.
Hey, Ann, great to talk to you again. It's Donnie. I want to talk about the Kasich factor in Ohio, but then broaden out a little bit. I think he's got a 58, 59% approval rating. One could say it's clearly the endorsement does not matter that much. Is it fair to say, as you go state by state, because each of these candidates has 100% awareness level, are so polarizing, that the endorsement factor is almost a non-issue everywhere?
Well, I think there is a role that John Kasich may be playing in Ohio, and that is he is virtually as popular with Democrats as he is with Republicans. And that's almost unheard of in this age of polarization where everybody wants to hate everybody from the other party. So the fact that he scores so well in Ohio, broadly across the board, to me, has kind of created an atmosphere where it's okay to like Republicans in Ohio. And I can't say that that would have been true for the past two elections before he really came to prominence, and certainly national prominence. So I think there's a Kasich effect. His distance from Trump doesn't seem to be hurting Trump at all.
And one number caught my eye in the poll. I want to know how unusual it is. Union households in Ohio, Clinton wins within the margin of error, 48 to 45% for Trump. Do Republicans normally do that well with union households in Ohio and generally?
Normally, union households are a stronghold for Democrats, although in recent elections that's been narrowing a bit. It is a group that Hillary Clinton wins with, so she overcomes the 5-point deficit, plus she gets 3 points more there. I think it's offset by a great concern in Ohio with trade. We asked a question about NAFTA and whether it has done more for Ohio in terms of more exports, therefore more jobs, or more to hurt Ohio by losing companies and losing jobs. A majority of people say that, in fact, it's hurt Ohio, and that includes a plurality of Democrats. So jobs being by far the most important issue, there's an economic basis that suggests that Trump's approach is winning.
But I'll say, Ann, of the four candidates we've talked about, the two presidential candidates and the two Senate candidates, the one who's been the most pro-trade in this race is Rob Portman, and he's winning overwhelmingly. So he's defying that sentiment, which reflected in that NAFTA question in the state against free trade.
That may well be. Portman is doing well, has really sort of blown out the race, at least as it stands today. We know that he gets 20% of Hillary Clinton's supporters, so there's some cross-voting going on there with people who like his stance.
And another interesting little sidebar. Hillary, with her young voters, when you start to put the third and fourth party candidates in, loses a lot more of that youth to that candidate. Very interesting.
That's right. When we do a two-way test, and those are the numbers that we've shown you before, in a four-way test, her number is decreased because 22% of people under age 35 say they're supporting Gary Johnson, which is a huge number, and for her to lose that many to that candidate, I mean, that's a signal that her constituency that she relies on, that young group of voters, they're not very solid.
And we all know not to overreact to any single poll, but are we right to look at this result and say it's a big deal that Trump up by 5 in Ohio?
Well, at the time that this poll was released this morning, there wasn't another poll that showed him up by that many points. So that's always a moment where you double check all the protocols as we go through the data yesterday morning to make sure that there's nothing that's bothering us. This afternoon, CNN released a poll showing Trump up by 5 in Ohio. So I don't know. Do we exhale?
Yep.
Who knows? Both polls could be wrong, of course, but there seems to be a trend.
Based on my talks with the campaigns, I don't think it's wrong. Ann, great job as always. Thank you. As she said, CNN also has Trump up by 5 in Ohio. They also have Trump up by 3 in Florida amongst likely voters. Ann Seltzer in Des Moines, thank you very much. Up next, we'll be talking about the man of the world. We'll tell you who that is and what it means for your traffic and weather in just a moment. And if you're watching us in the nation's capital, you can listen to this program on the radio anytime at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back.
Joined now by the man of the hour to talk about his new book, Man of the World, The Further Endeavors of Bill Clinton. Joe Conason is the author of that book and editor-in-chief of the National Memo. Joe, welcome to the show. As Mark said off camera, you and all future guests will be showing us your medical
forgot them.
records.
Bring them next time.
Yeah. I want to start with a question. It's interesting. I spent 2 days on the bus with Bill in the '92 campaign shooting a documentary. Got to see him up close. He has that magic. One of the greatest political minds of all time. If we go back to that and said he was a 10 as far as sharpness, as far as in charge, the Bill Clinton of today that physically you see looks different. A lot of people says he still doesn't have it. Where is he versus then in a 10 now?
Well, I hate to rate him. I mean, he just turned 70 years old, Donnie, as you know. So, I mean,
I'll put it over. Does he still have it?
You lose a step, right, when you get to be that age. But I'll tell you, in the book, I talk about going to Philadelphia with him towards the end of the primary season. And it was that famous incident where he engaged with a black protester just outside of Philly. And that did not turn out well. And you could feel at that point he had lost a step. There was something off there. And it was a little bit reminiscent of 2008, some of the stuff that Mark and John wrote about. But earlier that day, I went with him to a convention of the African Methodist Episcopal ministers and bishops from all over the country. No other press there. I was traveling with him for the book, and they knew that. And he was on his game totally. He had them all rising from their seats, applauding. He was quoting scripture. And all of those, mostly men, religious leaders went back to their pulpits and instructed everybody, we're with her. And of course, they delivered. So, you know, he could still do that, and very, very well.
What do you know about how he feels about the following fact? This campaign has seen a repudiation of the crime bill that he was so proud of in the 90s, of his free trade efforts, NAFTA and other trade bills, of the notion of the era of big government being over. How does he feel about the fact that his wife's presidential campaign seems to have moved the Democratic Party further to the left than he had it?
Well, you know, Mark, he's very pragmatic politically. I mean, I think he would think this is a different era, and that's mostly okay. I think he would argue with the trade issue if he felt more able to speak up. I think he, you know, for himself, I think he would certainly argue about the crime bill, and he did a bit, you know, in that incident that we just discussed. And, you know, he would remind people, as he did then, that Bernie Sanders voted for the crime bill, too. So as far as the era of big government, I think he left that, you know, statement behind a long time ago himself. If you look at the last book he wrote, Back to Work, that is an endorsement of government action in many, many respects. And in fact, you know, the work in the foundation, a lot of it has been in concert with government. It's not private sector alone. It is private sector working with government.
That's
not just
a big difference from government. Private sector with government is a pretty...
Well, he's always been for that. Yeah. And I would say she is, too. I mean, I think her campaign says the same thing. We need partnerships, you know, philanthropic ways that you get government to be more effective, and you do that by engaging the private sector a lot of the time. What, you know, what the boss of this place thinks too. I mean, they're in sync on a lot of those issues. I think it's true that as far as what the responsibilities of government are, that is to say, to make sure everybody has health care, everybody has education, that we have good public services, I think he's always been on that page, and it's just a question of how you do it.
Describe to us, if come November 8th it goes Hillary's way, Bill Clinton, first husband. What is that going to look like?
First gentleman, Donnie.
First gentleman. What is that going to look and feel like? Describe that 6 months into the presidency.
I think nobody knows. You know, at the end of the book, I sort of say this is a job that nobody's had before, and he's going to have to invent it. Just the way he sort of reinvented the post-presidency, which is what the book is really about. But I would say there are at least two things that I would imagine him wanting to do. And this is not really based on a discussion with him, it's just observation. One is he's one of the most talented diplomats we've ever had. You know, he proved that in North Korea and on other occasions that I describe in the book. So there's that. And he's still, even at age 70, some of the generation that he worked with as president have passed from leadership, but a lot of them are still around. They're elder statesmen, and he still knows everybody. So there's that aspect of it, and he could work on a lot of different issues for her diplomatically if he wanted to, and if she wanted him to. The other is, and I think people don't know this about him as much, he's obsessed with climate change and clean energy. The transition to clean energy has been an obsession of his for years. You probably know this. There was a point where he went to Obama in 2009 and said, I have a plan for you, and it will create 1 million jobs, and we can weatherize and create conservation in all kinds of commercial buildings, and here's how we get a loan guarantee system. Very wonkish stuff. He's into that. He wants to do that.
We have less than a minute. I want you to weigh in on something you know well, the media and Hillary Clinton. Why is the media so tough, tougher on her than I think anyone I've ever covered? Why is that?
I don't really know. You know, I could speculate. People were angry when they sort of slipped the punch on Whitewater, even though that was a bogus thing. But, you know, you remarked on this in 2008. I'll never... one of the fairest, most thoughtful comments I saw that year about the coverage of her in that campaign was, they're tougher on her, and you didn't have the answer then either. I don't know, but I don't think it's fair.
I have, again, 20 seconds, not a comprehensive answer. Give me one reason why she gets such tough coverage. Doesn't have to be a global explanation. One reason. I
think there's history between her and the press, and I think they don't always handle it well.
Okay, Joe Coniston, great new book. It's out now, Man of the World, The Further Endeavors of Bill Clinton. Joe, thanks, and we'll be right back. So if Donald Trump puts out the same stats Hillary Clinton puts out, does that pretty much end the discussion of their health?
It does, but I actually agree with Alex's point. He doesn't have to. And today was a perfect example of these two candidates in the campaign. Hillary Clinton, a fact sheet of things, and even that's still not enough. Donald Trump going on Dr. Oz, a daytime talk show, waving a letter, and that'll be enough for him. I don't think he's going to release it.
I think he will, and I think hopefully we'll get to know a lot more. There is more about our Ohio poll at BloombergPolitics.com, where Trump's up 5. We're going to be tracking the latest developments overnight on all the candidates and their health. We'll have more for you tomorrow on WADR. Coming up next on Bloomberg West, CEOs Emmett Shear and Padma Warrior, both together again for the first time. Until tomorrow, for me and for Donnie, thanks for watching. Sayonara.
I'm Mark Crumpton. You're watching Bloomberg West. Let's begin with a check of first word news. Medical records have taken center stage in the 2016 presidential race. Doctors for the candidates ruled both fit to serve. Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton released details from her medical exam today, including treatment in the past week for pneumonia. Hours earlier, Republican nominee Donald Trump gave television host Dr. Oz a summary of his recent physical during a taping of the show. Meantime, a pastor at an African-American church in Flint, Michigan, reminded Trump he wasn't there to deliver a political speech. The Republican nominee was abruptly cut off when he segued from discussing the city's water contamination crisis to criticizing Hillary Clinton. The U.S. and Israel have signed a new defense deal, giving the Israeli military $38 billion over 10 years. It's the largest such agreement the U.S. has ever had with any country. It calls for Israel to spend all of the money on U.S.-made military equipment. After nearly 20 years, the U.S. will lift all sanctions in place against Myanmar. The news came as the country's de facto leader and Nobel Peace Laureate Aung San Suu Kyi met with President Obama in the Oval Office. Swedish prosecutors will interview WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange on October 17th. He's wanted for questioning over an alleged rape. He's been holed up at Ecuador's embassy in London for 4 years. I'm Mark Crumpton. Bloomberg West is next.
And this is Bloomberg West. Coming up, Uber's self-driving cars are officially on the streets. We hail a ride to find out what it's like behind the wheel of their Pittsburgh pilot. Plus, Twitch, the company that has made gaming a group activity, is branching out. CEO Emmett Shear